The bitter November wind came screaming down off the high ridge above Oakhaven, carrying a dry, biting frost that turned the mud of the county road into jagged iron. Abigail Ross stood on the wooden porch of the general store, with a single carpet bag set between her shoes, watching her late husband's cousin drive away in the farm wagon that had been hers only 3 days before. When Arthur Ross died of the fever, his family from town had descended upon the homestead like blackbirds on a ripe cornfield. They produced old, forgotten notes of debt, claimed every head of stock, and informed Abigail that an unpaid farm was no place for a childless widow of 28. She had given 6 years of hard, bone-wearying labor to that quarter section, turning virgin sod and scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled, only to be handed $20 and told she had until sundown to make her own way. Abigail was too proud to beg, and too stubborn to let the dry goods clerk or the whispering women by the flour barrels see her cry. She picked up her bag and walked out past the timberline as the shadows lengthened, with nowhere to go and the temperature plummeting toward zero. In the high country, an unwanted woman without money or kin on the edge of winter was as good as dead, and Abigail knew it. She walked until the icy wind cut through her woolen shawl, her boots numb, her lungs burning, until her knees gave out on the gravel shoulder 2 miles past the edge of nowhere. She was sitting on a frost-covered stump, her hands tucked tight under her arms, when a heavy draft wagon came rumbling out of the dusk. It was driven by Seth Mercer, a man of 38 who ran a cattle range and a small sawmill up in the timber. Seth was a quiet, weathered man with shoulders broad as a barn door and eyes that looked at the world with an unhurried, steady gravity. He had lost his young daughter and wife to the lung fever 4 years past, and since then, he lived alone, working from first light to dark, keeping his own counsel and avoiding the gossip of Oakhaven. Seth pulled the heavy team to a halt, wrapped the lines around the brake lever, and stepped down into the dust. He did not ask her why she was out on a freezing road, nor did he offer pity, which he knew instinctively would only sting a proud heart. He looked at her thin shawl, her blue lips, and the single bag at her feet. "You'll not sleep in the cold," he said, his voice low, level, and solid as granite. "It's 6 miles to the next place, and the frost tonight will kill anything left out under the stars." He pointed up the trail toward the dark line of pines. "I've a double-built log house up the ridge. My late mother's side of the house has been shut up since she passed, but the hearth is good, and the roof doesn't leak. There's a room with a heavy oak door that locks from the inside, a good iron stove, and a bed with feather ticks. You can keep the place clean, cook a hot meal when you're able, and I'll pay you a fair weekly wage. You'll owe me nothing but honest work, Mrs. Ross, and no man will cross that threshold without your leave. Will you come?" Abigail looked up at Seth's plain, unvarnished face and saw no deceit in it, only the simple decency of a man who could not ride past a freezing creature. She took his hand, let him haul her up to the high seat, and rode up into the mountains. When they reached his place, Seth did not usher her into his own quarters. He opened the heavy door to the east wing of the timber house, lit a kerosene lamp, and kindled a fire in the iron stove until the cedar logs crackled with heat. He handed her a brass key, set a bucket of fresh spring water on the bench, and stepped back onto the porch. "The bolt works from the inside," Seth said simply. "Sleep long, Mrs. Ross. The morning comes when it comes." That night, for the first time in months, Abigail lay in a warm, dry bed, listening to the wind howl through the high pines outside, while the stove glowed red in the corner. In town, she had been treated as a burden, a nuisance, and a scandal waiting to happen. Here, behind an oak door that was hers to lock, there was no judgment, no prying questions, and no demands. Seth rose before dawn, fed his stock, and worked at his sawmill, leaving a crock of fresh butter and a side of bacon on the kitchen table, without expecting a single word of dramatic gratitude in return. As the snow locked the mountain trails in December, Abigail set about earning her keep with a fierce, quiet devotion. Seth's house was sturdy, but it had grown cold and gray around a man who merely used it as a shelter between work shifts. In the parlor of the East Wing sat an old, dust-covered loom, a massive, beautiful 8-harness floor loom that had belonged to Seth's mother, who had been a master weaver before her hands grew stiff. Weaving was Abigail's true, hidden craft, a gift taught to her by her grandmother that she had not touched since marrying Arthur. She found crates of raw sheep's wool in the barn attic, washed and carded it by the fire, and set to work. She dyed the wool using natural barks, madder root, and walnut hulls she gathered from the snow-covered woods, creating rich, deep shades of indigo, rust, and forest green. Under her hands, the old loom came alive, rhythmic and steady, beating out a music that filled the quiet timber house. She wove massive, heavy, overshot coverlets, wool blankets, and thick rug runners. The first coverlet she finished, a striking Star of the West pattern in deep navy and warm cream, she laid across the foot of Seth's bed while he was out on the range. When Seth came in frozen from the timberline that evening and saw the warmth and beauty brought into his dark room, he stood motionless for a long time, running his calloused thumb over the tight, perfect stitches. For the first time in 4 years, the cold shadow in his eyes softened. By February, the news that the castaway widow was living at Mercer's sawmill reached Oakhaven. Mrs. Gable, the self-appointed moral guardian of the county, braved the packed snow in her cutter to visit the ridge, her eyes bright with malicious curiosity. She stepped into the warm kitchen, sniffing the air filled with the scent of pine dye and fresh-baked bread, and found Abigail sitting at the loom. "Abigail Ross," Mrs. Gable began, her tone dripping with artificial sorrow. "The whole church is talking. A young woman living right here on a widower's place, all alone through the shut-in winter. It is a terrible scandal. You are throwing away what little reputation you have left, child. You ought to come into town and take a room in someone's washhouse until you can find proper employment." Before Abigail could speak, Seth stepped through the heavy timber doorway, his boots caked with snow and his shoulders blocking the light. His voice was quiet, but it carried the cold weight of an avalanche. "Mrs. Gable," Seth said, "I found this woman freezing on a public road, when not one righteous soul in your church thought to check if she had a roof over her head. She lives here in her own wing, behind a locked door, earning her wage by the work of her own hands. A town that cares more for how a thing looks than whether a woman lives or freezes isn't a town whose opinion I value. Abigail stays by this fire as long as she pleases, and you may drive your cutter right back down my road." Mrs. Gable turned red, pulled her fur collar tight, and hurried out to her sleigh without another word. When spring thawed the valley roads in April, Seth loaded a wagon with Abigail's woven coverlets and brought her down to the township spring fair to sell her work. The coverlets were an instant sensation. Merchants from 2 counties away bid against one another for her intricate blankets, filling Abigail's leather purse with real silver. In the middle of the crowded square, Thomas Ross, the greedy cousin who had evicted her, saw Abigail well-dressed, prosperous, and standing beside the most respected rancher in the timber district. Driven by spite and bitter jealousy, Thomas pushed through the crowd and shouted for all to hear. "Look at the pious widow," Thomas sneered, pointing a finger at her. "Living in a lonely man's house all winter, taking his charity because she was too lazy to work her own farm. She's a disgraced woman who took the easy way out." Abigail did not flinch, nor did she hide behind Seth. She stepped directly forward, her head held high, her voice ringing clear over the hushed square. "Thomas Ross," she said, "you turned me out onto a frozen road with $20 after I gave 6 years of my life to build that farm. You took the horses, the cattle, and the roof over my head, leaving me to die in a winter storm. Seth Mercer gave me a locked door, a wage, and the use of his mother's loom. I paid for every crust of bread I ate with the labor of these hands, and today I have earned enough to buy your team of horses twice over. I took no charity, Thomas, but you took a dead man's widow and robbed her. Let this town decide who holds the shame." The crowd murmured in agreement, turning their backs on Thomas. Humiliated and exposed before his peers, Thomas slunk away into the alleys, his name ruined in Oakhaven forever. By May, Abigail had her own bank account, a reputation as the finest weaver in the territory, and more orders than she could fill in a year. She had earned enough to buy her own small cottage in town if she chose. She was entirely free, beholden to no man. On a warm evening when the mountain laurel was blooming white across the ridge, Seth walked out to the porch where Abigail was winding yarn. He stood beside her, looking out over the valley. "Abigail," Seth said softly, his plain-spoken voice steady and deep. "I waited until the roads were open and your purse was full to say this, because I wanted you to have your freedom first. You have your own money now, your own good name, and the means to go anywhere you like. You don't need my house, and you don't need my fire." He reached out and gently took her work-worn hands in his own. "So I'm asking you now, not out of rescue, but because I love you. I don't want a housekeeper, Abigail. I want you to have the whole house. Marry me. Not because you've nowhere to go, but because this place was cold and dead until you brought your music into it. And I want to stand beside you as your partner for all the days we have left." Abigail looked into the honest, steady eyes of the man who had stopped his wagon on a frozen road to save her, and smiled. "I chose this house the night you gave me the key, Seth," she answered softly. "I'm staying because I love you." They were married that June under the high pines, with the whole valley attending to wish them well. Together, Seth and Abigail built a long, rich life on the mountain. They expanded the homestead, raised 4 strong children, and built a workshop where Abigail taught young castaway women the art of the loom, giving them a trade and their own independence. Framed above the stone hearth, in their parlor, hung the very first Star of the West coverlet Abigail had woven during that long, snowbound winter. It remained throughout their lives a quiet symbol that the coldest nights can lead to the warmest fires, and that a life broken into scraps can be woven into something beautiful if it is held in decent hands. If this one warmed you tonight, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I hope it found you well. I'll see you in the next one.